Meanwhile, a short time ago, President Obama celebrated the third and final day of celebrations marking the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. In his speech at the LBJ Presidential Library in Austin, Texas, President Obama reminded audiences that no right, not even those embodied in that landmark piece of legislation, are ever fully secure.
We are here today because we know we cannot be complacent. For history travels not only forwards, history can travel backwards.
President Obama's words come one day after former President Bill Clinton used his speech to denounce the strict voter ID laws in several states that many believe are directly aimed at suppressing the vote, particularly among minorities and lower-income Americans, some of the very people who fought for that 1964 law and the Voting Rights Act that passed a year later. President Clinton also used his speech to say that while many may remember President Johnson as the Vietnam president, he thinks LBJ ultimately will be known as the civil rights president. And our next guest has been a leading figure in the civil rights movement since the 1960s, when he worked on expanding voter registration in the segregated South, including as Georgia Field Secretary for the NAACP and a contemporary of Medgar Evers, and, of course, ultimately as the head of the National Urban League. And Vernon Jordan was also a top advisor to President Bill Clinton, and I'm so pleased that you were able to join us now.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, give me your ruminations on the experience in Austin. President Clinton's speech, he talked about this change in the idea of Lyndon Johnson from at the time being a figure of controversy among the Democrats, particularly because of Vietnam, to one who's sort of finally coming into his own as the civil rights president.
Well, it was an extraordinary day. And I think about it last night when I was there with Andrew Young, with John Lewis, with Julian Bond, with President Clinton. It was like a reunion of the righteous, a reunion of the warriors, all celebrating what Lyndon Johnson did 50 years ago. And it was such a warm feeling, and we did not deal with how things are now back to almost where we were in 1964. We saw that we were all positive and feeling good about it.
Yeah.
But things are not so good either.
No, I do want to talk about sort of that retrenchment that we're seeing among a lot of people who are saying all that you and, as you said, the other warriors at the time fought for is now passé and not needed anymore. But just for 1 second, I want to have you take us back at the time. What did all of you young people who were, in a lot of cases, very young people, young men and women who were fighting for the basic civil rights of African Americans in the South, what did you all think of Lyndon Johnson?
For me, he was my hero. He was a guy from the South who stood in the well of the Congress and said, "We shall overcome." He was a guy who confronted Richard Russell, the senator from the state where I lived and was born, and said, "I'm going to do this." And that was... Now, keep in mind that government by its very nature is not an initiating body. It's a responding, responsive entity. And so Lyndon Johnson heard it when he was in the White House and demonstrators were outside singing, "We shall overcome." He got the message, and he got Republicans and Democrats together, and we got the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
I mean, and given how much blood was shed, Medgar Evers assassinated, killed in his own driveway, the amount of work and toil to a year after getting the Civil Rights Act, still needing to have a Voting Rights Act on top. What do you think when you hear somebody like Chief Justice John Roberts essentially say that none of that is necessary anymore and open the door to sort of begin to reestablish barriers to voting?
I think about a 90-year-old black man in Wilcox County, Alabama, on August 6th, the day that the Voting Rights Act became operative. He stood in the line of some 3,000 black people most of the day. When he got to the registrar, he had to give him his age. And the registrar said, if you are 90 years old, what took you so long to get here? And the old brother said, because I've had a philosophy all my life to never get in the way of trouble or coming. And so the registrar said, well, why are you here today? And the old man said, because trouble ain't a coming like it used to did.
Yeah. And I mean, when you think about the idea of having an African-American president, something, I can just ask you, is this something that you could have imagined at that time?
No.
Well, then assess for us. You get a lot of comparisons of President Obama to Lyndon Johnson, where people say, well, Lyndon Johnson went down and, jammed his finger into the chest of those senators. He was able to make them get things done. And then sort of President Obama sort of is given a negative comparison to him and saying, well, why can't he get those Tea Partiers to do it? Could you even conceive of something like the Civil Rights Act of 64 passing this current Congress today, no matter who the president was?
No, I could see this Congress doing something just the opposite, as the Supreme Court has been doing in the Shelby County case and the recent case involving political contributions. We're back to where the old man was. I didn't come because trouble is a-coming, and it's trouble a-coming like it used to did. It's just different. Nobody's in white sheets. They're in 3-button suits. And signs are not saying colored and white. And there are no signs even saying black people go home. But implicit in these new voter registration laws, in these new Supreme Court decisions, it's taken us back. Yeah. And that is, in my judgment, the challenge going forward.
And so then advise the young activist of today who is wanting to do what you did during those formative years. What can and should people be doing to fight back?
Well, I think the first thing they have to understand is the history of how we got where we are today. Yesterday, I was in Austin, Texas, and I thought about the time that I was in Austin, Texas, to dedicate the county courthouse to the plaintiff, Heman Marion Sweat, who was a plaintiff in Sweat versus Painter. He was a young postal worker who finished Wiley College and decided he wanted to go to the University of Texas Law School. Thurgood Marshall was his lawyer. In that courtroom, when we dedicated the courthouse, the black women who fed Marshall and put him up because everything was segregated were in that courtroom. That was a great moment. They need to know who Heman Sweat was and what his sacrifices were, how his wife left him because of the threatening telephone calls. One of the great experiences of my life is that Heman Marion Sweat worked for me at the National Urban League. He's a real hero. Nobody knows him. Primus King, the plaintiff in King versus Chapman, the Georgia white primary case, was an itinerant Baptist preacher who the establishment of Columbus, Georgia, and Muskogee County called him in about dealing with that communist Thurgood Marshall to file a suit challenging the white primary. And they told him, if you don't withdraw that suit, you could end up in the Chattahoochee River. And in 1943, Primus King said, well, if I end up in the Chattahoochee River, white people, at least I'll be thrown in there for something, because all of those other black people were thrown in there for nothing. That's courage. So history, understand how we got where we are. However successful I may have been in life, I am absolutely certain about one thing. I did not get here by myself.
Indeed. Vernon Jordan, somebody who I greatly respect, in part because you don't just talk about this, you did this. Legend is not used very often, but I think it absolutely applies to you, sir. It is an honor. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.